Hey everyone, this is David Brown with the migration update for March 29th, 2023 from the Braddock Bay Hawk Watch. We had fantastic weather today for a big flight. Throughout the morning and early afternoon, it was mostly sunny. The winds were out of the southwest, starting out somewhat light to moderate and increasing as the day went on. Finally, in the late afternoon, it became overcast and winds became gusty from the west as a cold front moved in. And really, the temperatures today started from around freezing. I had to scrape my windshield this morning, and then it got up into the low 50s by the mid-afternoon. And then when that cold front hit, by the time I got home, it was snowing pretty heavy, and the temperatures were just above freezing. So kind of a crazy day as far as weather goes. But for most of the day, we had those favorable southwest winds, and we had a really big flight. I got out to the platform in time for sunrise this morning, thinking there might be some non-raptors on the move, and had a couple nice highlights. So here, the goose on the right looks quite a bit smaller, so I would bet that this is a cackling goose. I also had this American pipit fly over, and you can just barely see the white outer tail feathers. This male wood duck flew by in perfect morning light. This common loon migrated past low and close as it headed north across the bay. This eastern meadowlark flew right over us and then posed in the tree while it sang for us. I saw my first rusty blackbirds of the season today, so note the pale eye and also the distinctive shape of the tail. Here's another rusty blackbird that really shows that rusty coloration on the head. This local osprey flew by with a real whopper of a fish. If you know what kind of fish this is, write it in the comments below, because it's pretty huge. And here's another angle of the osprey with the fish. Here we have an adult female northern harrier. You can notice that owl-like facial disc. And we know it's an adult female because the streaking is not only on the upper breast, but extends down all the way to the undertail coverts. And it's kind of a funny posture because this bird was kind of doing a quick turn in midair. So it's almost like the tail is scooping the air or something. So just a really funny posture as it was doing a quick change in direction. We had our second great egret of the season, or great egret as some people pronounce it. And it still got flagged as rare by eBird. I guess it's just a little bit on the early side yet. Here we have a juvenile red-tailed hawk. So notice the dark patagial bars and the belly band, and notice that it does not have the bold trailing edge to the wing or the red tail, so we know it's a juvenile. Here we have an adult red-tailed hawk, so notice the dark patagial bars and belly band again, but since this one is an adult, it has the bold dark trailing edge to the wing and a red tail, although from this angle, it's hard to see the red tail. And it looks like this bird has a full crop, which is this bulge right here, which means it has eaten recently. Here we have a turkey vulture, which may not seem that exciting, but this was one of over 3,800 turkey vultures that we had today. So it's likely that this was the peak turkey vulture day of the season, and really just the whole day from about 9 o'clock when they were first coming up until about 4:30 when the flight shut down. It was just constant streams of turkey vultures going by the entire day. Here we have an adult Cooper's hawk. So Cooper's hawks are accipiters, so they have long tails. We know that it's a Cooper's hawk and not a sharp-shinned hawk, first of all, because it has a big head. The back of the neck, known as the nape, is pale. The blue is only on the top of the head, giving it a capped appearance. And maybe most importantly of all, if we look at the tail feathers, we see that the outer tail feathers, which tuck on the bottom, are shorter, and then the feathers get longer as you get towards the middle. That's a classic field mark for Cooper's hawk, and that's the explanation for why people say that Cooper's hawk's tails look rounded, whereas sharp-shinned hawk tails look more squared off because the tail feathers are the same length. And we know it's an adult because of the orange barring on the underside and also that dark cap. Here we have a sharp-shinned hawk high overhead, and we know it's a sharp-shinned and not a Cooper's hawk, mainly because of the shape. And we could point out that it has a smaller head and that the tail looks more squared off. But really, just look at the overall shape of this bird. It looks more compact. It doesn't look really long and lanky like Cooper's hawks do. The wings look a little bit more rounded. You can see it pushing the wrist, which is this area here, pushes that forward. So if we were to draw a line across, the head doesn't stick out very much from that line. And it also gives the trailing edge of the wings more of a curved appearance. And just overall, the tail doesn't look super long. The wings don't look super long. It's just that compact shape that give it the feel of being a sharp-shinned hawk. And someone asked me today, right after I had called out a sharp-shinned hawk, might have even been this one, they said, "How did you know that was a sharp-shinned hawk?" And I said, "I don't know," which was a way for me just to pause for a second to gather my thoughts. But they said, "Oh, okay," and moved on. But really, that's there's some truth to that, where accipiter identification is just really difficult, but you start to see so many of each of them and you get a feel for the overall shape and the way that they move and how quickly they flap. And it's something that's really hard to put into words and explain to someone so that they can then apply it directly and get the identification correct. But after you get more experience, it starts to become more second nature. But really, it took me a number of hawk watching seasons to even get to the point where I started to feel comfortable identifying Cooper's hawks versus sharp-shinned hawks. So now I'm fairly confident in most of my IDs, but it took a while to get to that point. Here we have another northern harrier. And again, notice they have kind of long, lanky wings that look somewhat pointed, fairly long tail, that owl-like facial disc. And this is another adult female we see that's got a lot of streaking underneath, including down here on the undertail, and also a fair amount of markings up through the patagial area. This killdeer gave us a pretty good look, and it's a little bit creepy with that red around the eye, but really cool birds. They're the main shorebird we're seeing right now. Really the only shorebird. There's a couple others that are possible, but it's the only shorebird we've had so far for the season. Notice the double band on the upper breast. Here we have an adult red-shouldered hawk. Got a pretty distinctive plumage where it's orange on the underside and throughout the wing here, and then it's got a bit of a black and white pattern on the flight feathers of the wing and on the tail. And remember that red-shouldered hawks are in the Buteo genus, along with red-tailed hawks, but red-shouldered hawks just seem a little slimmer. Their tail looks a little bit longer, not as big and bulky as a red-tailed hawk. Here we have a juvenile bald eagle overhead, so one that was born last year. And we can see that it's got an even little trailing edge to the wings because all of the feathers are the same age. In second and third year bald eagles, they've replaced some of these feathers with feathers that are slightly shorter, so we get more of a jagged trailing edge to the wing in those ages because of the mix of feather ages. When juvenile bald eagles are in fresh plumage, they're usually quite dark underneath, but by the spring, a lot of them are this lighter brown underneath because they're starting to molt feathers. Here we have an adult red-tailed hawk. Again, notice the patagial bars in the shoulder area and the belly band. And it's an adult because of the dark trailing edge to the wing and the red tail. Also notice the white throat on this bird. That's fairly common for the eastern subspecies, the borealis subspecies. We also see some of the northern subspecies, or abieticola, and those can have a dark throat. So we see sort of a mixture of the more lightly marked red tails and also more heavily marked ones. Here we have a light morph rough-legged hawk high overhead. And this one looks to be an adult male because of the bib here in the throat area. And if we saw a closer look, we'd probably see multiple tail bands. And we see the dark trailing edge to the wing. So this bibbed appearance with a little bit of marking on the belly, that's typical of the adult males, whereas females have like a really thick, blobby belly band here. Rough-legged hawks stand out mostly because their plumage is kind of a mix of lights and darks. So you can see there's a fair amount of dark here in the underwing, especially here. It's kind of a big square that's dark. It's not just like the thin patagial bars like we see on red tails. Also notice the shape. They have quite long, lanky wings. And like I said, we had thousands and thousands of turkey vultures today, but it's kind of hard to capture it in a photo. So this is the best I could do to kind of give an impression of what one group of vultures would look like. But really, there were times that you would just scan across the sky and you would see this whole thing all the way from the east spit on our right You'd scan back across the bay and off into the distance, and it was just like an endless stream of vultures coming. Here we have another adult red-tailed hawk showing the same field marks we saw before. So we see those dark patagial bars and the belly band. And it's an adult, so it has the dark trailing edge and the red tail, although in this photo quality, some of those things are a bit hard to see. We can also rely on the big, bulky shape to help rule out similar species like red-shouldered hawk. Here we have a sharp-shinned hawk, so relatively small head and very squared-off tail. Here we have another poor photo of a red-tailed hawk, but even so, we can see those dark patagial bars and a hint of the belly band, and the dark trailing edge of the wing even stands out. And on this bird, we also see that it has a full crop like we saw earlier. So this has eaten recently, and this looks like a pretty big crop, so it must have eaten a lot. Here's an immature bald eagle. This looks like one that's coming up on 2 years old because of being white underneath and a pretty ragged trailing edge to the wing. Looks like maybe multiple ages of feathers. And again, the longer feathers are the retained juvenile feathers, and the shorter, darker ones are ones that have been replaced already. Here's another sharp-shinned hawk showing that really squared-off tail because all of the tail feathers are the same length. Here's the first belted kingfisher that I've seen from the platform this year. I did have one earlier from the marina over by the East Spit, but this is the first one officially for the Hawk Watch. And this is a male belted kingfisher, and we know that because it does not have any of the brown that we would see on the underside of a female. And here's another angle of the same belted kingfisher, and notice the size of that bill. They dive into the water and catch fish. Here we have a female American kestrel, so notice the facial pattern is pretty distinctive. And we know it's a female because it's all brown on top and has a banded brown tail. And the kestrel stopped to rest for a moment after crossing the bay before continuing on with her migration. Here we have an adult male northern harrier, also known as a gray ghost. So really distinctive plumage, much different than the female and the juvenile northern harriers that we see. Here we have an adult bald eagle high overhead in a glide posture. And notice how much is tucking back those wingtips in this glide posture. But even if we couldn't see the white head and white tail, we would just notice that the head is fairly big. And that would help us roll out golden eagle, which would show a much smaller head compared to the length of the tail. Here's an adult sharp-shinned hawk. And again, notice that really squared off tail tip because all of the tail feathers are the same length. Compare that to this juvenile Cooper's hawk, where the tail looks a little bit more rounded because the center tail feathers are longer than the outer tail feathers. And just notice that the Cooper's hawk is a little lankier looking. The tail looks a bit longer, the wings look a little bit more stretched out, the head sticks out a little bit more. And juvenile Cooper's hawks have this kind of teardrop streaking that's mainly on the upper breast and then not much at all down on the belly. Sometimes sharp-shinned hawks can show similar streaking to this, but a lot of times on the juvenile sharp-shinned hawks, it's a bit blobbier looking than this. It's just thicker and messier looking. It's not this cleaner teardrop streaking. So that's also a supporting field mark you can use, although it's not 100%. And here's two sandhill cranes that I had towards the end of the day. We also had some cranes earlier. At one point, we had a group of 10. It was a group of 6 above a group of 4. So I think we had about 13 total for the day. If we look at the eBird checklist for today, I had 72 species, and I think this was the first time that I broke 70 species this season. And looking at the HawkCount report for our migrant raptor totals, today we had 3,864 turkey vultures, 1 osprey, 29 bald eagles, 23 northern harriers, 41 sharp-shinned hawks, 14 Cooper's hawks. For Buteos, we had 40 red-shouldered hawks, 126 red-tailed hawks, and 1 rough-legged hawk. And for falcons, we had 17 American kestrels and 2 merlins, for a total of 4,158 migrant raptors today. We had 2 new species for the season, which were rusty blackbird and barn swallow. And looking at the forecast for tomorrow, mostly cloudy early and then partly cloudy. High only 38, and I think the morning is starting out around 27 degrees. So it's going to be pretty cold, especially with the winds, which are west-northwest at 10 to 20 miles per hour. So I would expect there to be a moderate amount of migration. Those westerly winds, west-northwest, are okay winds for us. It's not favorable like a southwest wind, but it's not terrible either. So I would expect the decent turkey vulture flight to continue and moderate numbers of other things as well. So hope to see you out tomorrow, but if you do, be sure to bundle up because it's going to feel cold. For Friday, looking at rain early and then cloudy with showers. High up around 50, winds south-southeast at 10 to 15 miles per hour. So it's a southerly wind, but it looks like we'll have rain with it. We'll have to keep an eye, but not looking great. For Saturday, it's looking windy, a steady light rain, and then showers. High around 60, so pretty warm. Winds west-southwest at 25 to 35 miles per hour. So very strong west-southwest winds. I think even gusting up over 50 miles per hour. So even though it's a good wind direction, seems like it might be too strong and too rainy, but we'll keep an eye on Saturday. All right, another great day at the Hawk Watch. I know we didn't get any golden eagles or goshawks, so it takes a little bit of the fun and excitement out of it, but really big turkey vulture flight. This was probably the peak turkey vulture day of the season. I like turkey vultures because they're big and easy to count. When you have thousands and thousands of broadwings, they're a little bit tougher for the counter, so I'll take turkey vultures any day. But just a really fun day to be out. A lot of visitors. I hope a lot of people had fun coming out, even though, like I said, we didn't get some of the rarer raptors that people might have been hoping for. But you only get so many days with good southwest winds, and like I mentioned yesterday, the weather today was pretty much perfect, just with those southwest winds the entire day at a good speed. So fun day to be out on the platform with everyone. And if you missed today, or even if you joined us today, I hope you can join us soon at the Braddock Bay Hawk Watch. From Lyco Birds, this is David Brown. Thanks for watching.